one family, one earth, and together we can make a difference in our world. Every creed and color, every boy and girl, all of creation, no separation. We are one heart. Even though it seems we are so far apart, and many times we're feeling all alone, the truth of who we are has been here from the start. We are one heart. Together we can make a difference in our world. Every creed and color, every boy and girl, all of creation, no separation. We are one heart. Even though it seems we are so far apart, and many times we're feeling all alone, the truth of who we are has been here from the start. We are one heart, one life. We are one family, one earth, one heart, one life. We are one family, one earth.
Dear friends, for those of you who've arrived already, please take a moment to use the 3 double dots next to your name to rename yourself with your first name and the location, country that you're coming from this morning or this afternoon. So if you watch me,
We are one family, one earth, one heart, one life. We are one family, one earth, and together we can make a difference in our world.
Dear friends, welcome to our session this afternoon on Compassion is the Best Protection, Healing Our Hearts and Our World, with Kaira, Lingo, and one of our order members as a guest, Sita Brand. So just before I take you through the running order, my name's Vari, by the way, if you don't know me, I'm going to take you through the running order so we know what we're going to be able to enjoy this afternoon. But I'd like to offer 3 sounds of the bell so that we can come back to our breathing, come back to our body, and come back to this present moment, and to really enjoy being present for ourselves, and also recognizing that we're not alone here, that there are over 100 of us on this call. And as we breathe, we can be united together as a Sangha online. So please do enjoy listening to the sound of the bell. It's the voice of the Buddha inviting us back to our true home, this present moment. So dear friends, we're very fortunate today to have Kaira here to speak with us and share with us. Kaira was a nun at Plum Village for 15 years, and now she teaches as a laywoman internationally. And Kaira has a lot of compassion in her teaching, and loves offering the Dharma to children as well as adults, and is very skilled at doing that. So it's wonderful to welcome Kaira to share with our Plum Village UK Sangha today. And joining Kaira to share her personal reflections on the topic, we're also very delighted to be able to welcome Sita Brand. Sita is one of our long-term order members of the community in the UK, and is also a Buddhist chaplain in prisons. So it's wonderful to have Sita with us too. As you're aware, this session is offered freely, but we would, if you're able to offer some dana, donation, that would be very gratefully received. The dana normally goes to the teacher, but Kaira's kindly agreed that half the dana will go to the Plum Village monastics, who obviously have no income at all at this, have very little income at this time. So in terms of what we're going to do today, we're going to, Kaira's going to offer us a meditation practice to go with this topic. And then Kaira will offer a talk, and Sita will follow that up with her own reflections. And we'll then have a short comfort break at about 4:15. And after that, and we'll also do some mindful movements then if you don't feel you need a comfort break. And then we have an opportunity to share in small groups of 4 for about half an hour. And then we'll come back and have an opportunity to ask Sita and Kaira some questions. But we won't be able to answer everybody's questions, I don't think, because of the time, but we will try our best. So just as you experience the meditation practice and the talks, I just invite you to hold in mind what wakes up your ability to be compassionate. So what wakes up your ability to be compassionate? So just dropping that as a little seed into your mind to hold in mind as as you enjoy this afternoon. So I'm going to hand over to Kaira now. Thank you very much, dear friends.
Thank you so much, Vari. Warm greetings and gratitude to all of you for being here, for your practice of being in Sangha in this way. A big part of what I want us to come away from this teaching, this experience today, is the importance of being in our bodies. So before we begin the meditation, I'd actually like to invite us to stand. You're welcome to do this seated if you don't want to stand, but just to kind of experience our bodies more fully. So whether you're seated or standing, I invite you to feel your connection to the earth. Just really feel the earth supporting you. And it can be supportive to take some deep breaths and actually vocalize when you exhale. So you could sigh, you could make a tone. But we'll take some deep breaths a few times down into the abdomen and then exhale, making some noise. So let yourself, make whatever noise you wish. Okay. Inhaling. Just really feeling your voice as you make a sound. Do that again. Down into the belly. And if you like, one more time. All right, and then if you want to shake out an arm, and shake out another arm, and shake out a leg, and shake out your other leg, and shake out what you were just sitting on if you're standing, and then let your whole body just shake. You can bounce or you can sway and swing, but just let some movement come through your whole body, including your face. So you can make some faces, squeeze your face, big and small. Great. And one more breath. And just noticing whatever is there in your body, having done this. Maybe it's some feeling of embarrassment or discomfort, or maybe something else, maybe some more ease. So as you're ready, you can come back to a seated position. Sometimes we forget that we have a body, especially when we're on screen. maybe many of us are on screen a lot more than we would have been in the past. So we can begin to just identify with the part of ourselves that's on screen. So I wanted us to experience our full bodies as we go into this practice. So this practice that I want to offer us as a meditation comes from a Tibetan teacher named John Makransky. And it's helping us to access the loving qualities, the dignity and compassionate capacities of our fundamental awareness, our Buddha nature, that can help us to heal our hearts and minds in its unconditional warmth, this compassion that's accessible to all of us. So this practice helps us to settle deeply into the openness and clarity of our compassionate wisdom, and also to establish a secure base of love, of compassion for ourselves that we need in order to extend compassion to others. So in this practice, I'm going to invite you to recall and then re-inhabit a caring moment when you were with another person. A moment that makes you feel happy to recall or feels deeply positive. A moment when someone was radiating warmth and care to you, seeing you in your deep worth, or deeply listening to you, or rooting you on, or taking joy in you, or wishing you well. So you can recall such a moment from any time in your life, whatever period of your life. And I'll just share a moment that I like to bring up when I do this practice. Is a time when I visited a friend who has two daughters, 4 and 12, I think. But the 4-year-old, after dinner, we had a sweet conversation. Just we helped the mom make salad dressing. I was really enjoying their presence. And after dinner, the 4-year-old asked if she could paint my fingernails. Give me she had this set of fingernail polish. I was about to go lead a retreat, so I said, maybe you could do my toes, not my fingers. So she pulled out all of her different colors, like she painted each toenail a different color. And she did a really good job for a 4-year-old. She didn't make a mess or anything. But I could see she was really enjoying it, and I was really enjoying her attention and care. And then I offered to paint her nails. She said, no, I'll want to do it myself. So she did her own nails. But it was just a sweet, sweet evening with this family. A lot of love exchanged in all directions. So if something comes to mind, some caring moment, or if it's hard to think of something, you could try one of these alternatives. So you could recall a caring moment with a pet, or recall a moment with another person or animal when you were the caring figure for them. So those are some other options. Or you can think of a moment when you were in a place that's special to you, perhaps in nature, where you felt deeply safe, well, at peace, or at home. And in the meditation that I'm going to lead us in, we focus on the feeling of this caring moment, not on the stories that our minds may create about our relationships. So we want to access that felt sense of that caring moment, dropping any stories. Well, but that person did such and such later, or it's not about that. It's really about recalling the feeling of how it felt to be cared for or to be in a space where you were caring for another, and to settle more and more fully into the feeling of it. Okay. You ready? Let's try. So I'll invite a sound of the bell, and you can begin to feel your breathing, especially in your abdomen. So sitting in a relaxed, comfortable way with your back straight. Your eyes can be open if you are open to that, gazing gently downward. Beginning with slow, deep breaths. Inhaling into the abdomen so that it expands, and exhaling slowly and completely, releasing all worries as you exhale. Relaxing for a moment at the end of the exhale before inhaling again. Doing this a few times. And then as you continue to breathe from the abdomen, let the breath settle into its own natural rhythm. So recall a caring moment now with its place or setting, and re-inhabit that moment as though it's occurring now. Bring this to mind not as a distant memory, but as a happening, as an event in the present moment, right now. Relax into the felt sense of this moment, steeping in its loving energy, feeling its tender qualities, and letting them infuse your whole being. Explore accepting this loving energy and tender qualities into your whole body and mind, into every part of your body, every layer of feeling and emotion. As if every part of you is loved in its very being. If any part of you is having difficulty with evoking these qualities or any part of the practice, without trying to change it in any way, just become aware of that part of you and what it's feeling in a completely accepting way, deeply allowing it to be here. Let it have the space it needs to relax. Find its own place within this compassionate space and settle in its own time. If your mind becomes tired, take a break, relax the mind, then freshly re-inhabit your caring moment and begin again. Or if you notice the mind wandering, freshly recall the caring moment and let its loving power draw you back into it, to settle into the feeling of it more and more within your whole body and mind. After a while, just relax deeply into this felt sense of love, warmth, and acceptance. Let this help your heart and mind to trust. Settle deeply. Release all of its images and frameworks and become completely open like space. Let patterns of thought and feeling that arise unwind and release within this utter openness of awareness. This space of warmth and deep acceptance, letting all be. Thank you for your practice. I'd love to take a few minutes to just reflect on that with you, to invite you to reflect on it together. So if you would be open, if you might share in the chat, if you could name a few of the loving qualities that you experienced when you opened up to re-inhabiting that caring moment. So if you wish, you can write in the chat a few of these loving qualities. Warmth, openness, joy, calm. Warmth, gratitude, tenderness. Held, generosity, wholeness. Held, valued, at peace. Peace, unconditional love, trust. Warmth, tearful, happiness, acceptance, calm. Care, love, connected. Tenderness, tearfulness, physical strength. Validation, glow. Past emotion was available to me in the present, calm. I would add to that a kind of humming in my whole body, a vibrating, softening, joy, laughter, rest. My mind went from a caring moment to drama, so I felt fear, yes. Calm, softening, peacefulness, tenderness, overwhelm, tears. I realized how underappreciated I have felt in the past. Acceptance, tears of love, appreciated, cared for, safety to grieve. Thank you, everyone, appreciated and loved, for writing these. And then letting go, aware of always holding myself, seen. Thank you. So there may have also been, as some of you have named, a difficulty or problem that came up for you during the meditation at some point, which signals how some part of you was reacting to the meditation, a part of you that wants to think about other things, or a part of you that doubts any caring moment is good enough, or maybe a part of you that doesn't think you deserve love or should be receptive to it, or a part of you that wants to grieve the loss of someone that was present to you in your caring moment. And when we use this part of you, those words, it's referring to a sense of self that's operative in that moment with its patterns of thought and feeling. So if you want to identify in the chat any difficulty, any obstacle that came up, that's also good information. I see some of you from the previous question have written, I felt hugs, interbeing, spacious and cool softening, awareness of the birds and cool breeze. So wanting to sleep, some say missing my dad, self-questioning, wandering mind, very good. Frozen, difficulty trusting, not good enough, grief. Yes, but then I did X, so I don't deserve this love. Sadness that I find difficult to accept compassion, remembering love, not feeling worthy, panic. I couldn't find a moment at first. Felt my grandmother's suffering. We were such a blessing to her as a survivor. Appreciation of my mom. Strong tension in part of the body, saying goodbye to my mom in her last moments. Some sadness that this remembrance was from so long ago, not a recent time. None of these people are in my life anymore. Sadness that I couldn't be lovable, nostalgic, sleepy, difficulty concentrating, grief. An opposite scenario popped up and I was pleased to let that go and come back to the love. Great. Sadness, lonely, guilt. Recalling caring moment from daughter and son, but not from my parents. Thank you for sharing this. So So there's parts of us that are defended, and may come up and try to sort of protect us from the vulnerability of going into these places of compassion. Tears that flowed into a smile and a feeling of gratitude, moments of numbness as well as joy, just so many tears which felt oddly relieving. It's beautiful. Distraction, fear of losing this space where love comes forward. Sometimes it comes and we don't want it to go, so we get distracted trying to keep it. Grace. So all this is part of connecting to. Every time we connect to this quality in us, it has a chance to grow. It has a chance to deepen and take deeper root in us. But part of deepening it and getting it more rooted in us is discovering the places in us that have resistance to this. So that's why reflecting on both, the positive qualities as well as the parts of us that weren't maybe open to it or weren't willing to flow as much. They're all really important information about what's in our system, what's going on, how we can know ourselves better, become more intimate with ourselves. And the instructions in the meditation are, when you notice things that prevent you or that are kind of an obstacle to connecting with the compassion, you let them be there as well. You give them space to be fully as they are, right? So I hope you'll keep practicing this, and maybe you already have this as your practice, but whenever there's an obstacle to compassion, just allowing it to be there as part of the field, giving it space, honoring it, welcoming it. So thank you, everyone. It's really lovely to read your reflections. So I'll go ahead and share some reflections on our theme tonight. And I just want to pause and scroll through the videos so I can see your faces. Just appreciating all of you and your practice. Really good to see all of you from all of these different places. Yeah. So this meditation we just did, it's so important to begin with bringing care and kindness, compassion to ourselves, because when we understand, when we have space for our own suffering, we have more space and skill in responding to others' suffering. And so we want to really start where we are. So if we have suffering, that needs to be attended to as part of our being present to other people and their suffering. And in that sense, this practice is a protection. It is a way of healing. It's a way of clearing ourselves out so that we can receive, so that we can be present for and connect to others. So it's something that we did it as a formal practice just now, but it's really helpful if we can bring it into our daily life many times a day. Like right when we wake up in the morning, to remember a powerful experience of care. Just to pause as you wake up, maybe put your hand over your heart and as you lie in bed, and just recall this moment, the feeling in your body that you had when you were really cared for, when you were really seen and felt loved. Because if we do that at the first thing in the day, it helps this awareness to grow in us. And this is a practice that Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai, a teacher to many of us on this call, I would imagine, encourages us to do in the waking up gatha, the poem, the verse, the mindfulness verse for waking up. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live them mindfully and to look at all beings with the eyes of compassion and love. So it's establishing ourselves in that framework from the beginning. And I think this practice could be a beautiful deepening of that gatha by putting us in touch with a real moment from our lives when we felt compassion or love coming to us or from us to some other being. And then just recalling it throughout the day can just be like the practice of the mindfulness bell. Different things that help us to stop and pause throughout the day. This remembrance of our own worthiness of love, our own belonging, our own sense of being beloved can be a kind of mindfulness bell that we can touch back into at different points throughout the day. And this really is a kind of medicine that can support us and strengthen us in times of difficulty, which I reckon these last few months and continuing until now would be considered a time of difficulty for most of us, a time of challenge. So there's a lot of desire in us, in our societies, in our families, in our own bodies to stay safe right now in this time of pandemic, in this time of great uncertainty and social upheaval and great loss, great grief, and great danger. There's a great need to be safe and to protect ourselves, to protect our loved ones. And maybe compassion is an important part of this protection. As Thai has said, compassion is the best protection. I had a chance to watch a beautiful documentary a few days ago of the Dalai Lama. It was called The 14th. It's not out yet. I got to see it. The screening was being showed just for a few days, but it will be out soon. I encourage you to watch it if you haven't seen it yet. But it's all his own words. It's all the Dalai Lama's own words, kind of reviewing his life and his insights, his experiences. But one of the stories he shares that really touched me is of a Tibetan monk who was his chant master in Tibet, who taught him the chants. His name was Thupten Chokden, and he was in a Chinese gulag for 18 or 19 years. And when he was allowed to leave and he went to Dharamsala and he met the Dalai Lama, they were having casual conversation, and he mentioned that he had had moments of danger in the gulag. And the Dalai Lama asked him, "What danger?" And he said, "Danger of losing my compassion toward the Chinese." So he knew that was his compassion, was his best protection to survive and that he would be in danger if he didn't have that compassion. So the Dalai Lama also shared that scientists studied those Tibetan monks and nuns who were in gulags after they had been released, and that there was no sign of traumatic experience in them, that their altruistic training and holistic views were an immense help to them to not develop anger and hatred. So when Thai was in exile from Vietnam after calling for peace and wasn't allowed to return to Vietnam, he organized some students, friends, to go out on a boat from, I believe, from Singapore to help support those fleeing from, this was after the war ended and the communists took over the whole of Vietnam, and many people were fleeing on boats, and they would drown or they would get lost. They would run out of water and food and be in very dire situations as refugees. And so he had this small group of friends and colleagues that would come out on a boat, and they would try to give maps so that the people could find their way to countries that would accept them. And they would bring water and food, and they would bring books so that they could learn the language of where they were going to be settling. And there were also pirates out on these waters that would attack these boats and steal, rape, kill. So there was an American student in the boat, in this team with Thai, who said, you know, we should carry a gun because there's dangerous pirates out there. And Thai absolutely refused to carry a gun. And he really felt that if they had a gun, that would communicate something energetically that would be very harmful to what they were trying to accomplish. And so he told his team, you know, compassion is our best protection. What we're intending to do out here is to help others, and that's our protection. I was sharing with a group of with a Sangha in Australia, and a dear friend and student who's a doctor was saying she has fear about getting sick from the coronavirus. She's a single mother. She doesn't want to bring it home and infect her children. She doesn't want anything to happen to her as a single mom. But she's a doctor and she needs to go take care of people. So she asked me how to take care of this fear. And I shared some of these stories of how we can be protected by our care. And I remember as a nun, I lived in the Plum Village community for 15 years as a nun, and there was a wonderful Dominican friar who would visit us regularly. He studied Thai. I mean, he considered Thai to be one of his main teachers. He wrote a book about Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai, and Meister Eckhart as his main teachers. So he had been a monk for many years, like 30 years. So we considered him our elder brother, and our practice was to always go out with a second body. So if you were a nun, you'd always take another nun with you. If you were a monk, you'd always take another monk with you. But he traveled alone. And so we had this question and answer time with him. And one monastic said, well, how come you don't have a second body to help protect you when you go out of the monastery? How is it that you travel alone? And he said, I don't see it as needing to protect myself from danger. I see myself bringing my love out into the world. That's what I emphasize, you know, how I'm bringing love into the world, not that I need to protect myself from something. And that's always stuck with me, that just a difference in perspective. Of course, this doesn't mean that in these times we don't protect ourselves with all the basic measures of masks and washing hands and staying home when we don't need to be out, or, you know, being careful with how we interact with others, social, physical distancing. But this, you know, getting in touch with what it is we want to bring into the world, it's a different framework than how we need to protect ourselves from something. This is a quote from Tai, who says, "An act of compassion always brings about transformation. If not right now, it will happen in the future. The important thing is you don't react with anger. You react with compassion, and sooner or later you see the transformation in the other person. You keep being compassionate, you keep being patient." So bringing compassion into the world always brings about transformation. So to experience compassion as a protection, it needs to be embodied. And I've been really interested in this last year in understanding the way trauma works and keeps us from being in our bodies, and also how it keeps us from our true nature of compassion, especially as it relates to structural harm that is created from one generation to the next. So there's grief that our parents, that our ancestors have experienced. There's trauma, there's pain that they've endured, that if they haven't been able to heal or metabolize, that gets passed on to us. And we may pass it on to our children or to the next generation if we don't see it clearly for ourselves and see how to heal it. And part of the healing is, first of all, becoming intimate with our own bodies and inclusive of our own experience, and undoing the habit pattern of being disembodied from our lived experience. So I'm sure you all have, those of you in the UK, I think most of you are calling in from the UK, we're aware of this time of uprising in the US, and that's been reflected and rippled a little bit everywhere in Europe and other places. That really was stimulated by this very brutal state-sanctioned violence of police officers killing Black people in the United States. And the root of this, you know, what's so clear now as a real problem, as a real distortion of what we want to be living in our society, what justice, what, you know, authority should look like. The root of this is unhealed collective and individual trauma and intergenerational trauma, which is part of being cut off from ourselves. I mean, You can only brutally kneel on someone's neck and snuff their life out and oppress and, prevent others from having their full humanity. You can only do that when you're cut off from yourself, from your own body, from your own emotions, from your own humanity. And as a population, we can only watch that and allow it to happen when we're cut off from our own bodies, from our own fullness, from our own heart. And we allow these things to happen because we're not fully here. The grief, the trauma that we've inherited keeps us from actually being fully present. And this is a collective experience of our own personal pain and loss that's clogged up in our systems, our ungrieved grief, but also generations of people who were abused, who were mistreated, who haven't grieved, who weren't able to grieve their grief, and who passed on trauma from one generation to the next. So this is James Baldwin, who writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. So there's a book that I've been teaching and recommending called My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Menakem, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. And I sent you all in the email leading up to this event some articles to read in preparation. And one of them was a short article by Resma Menakem on this, how trauma gets passed on and how the experience of racialized violence, which happens in many more places than just the United States, which is what this book focuses on, is really rooted in disembodiment and unhealed trauma. And one of the things he points to in this book is that, the brutalization of African bodies by European bodies, the genocidal treatment of native bodies by European bodies was not just, didn't just start in these British colonies, the new world. It started in Europe, where in the Dark Ages, in the Middle Ages, there was incredible suffering and physical, physical punishment, torture, hangings, beheadings. All these things were very public, and people in stocks and pillories and getting your ears chopped off or your tongue split as punishment. These were sort of regular occurrences that everyone was traumatized by, and that wasn't able to be addressed. And the Puritans who came over were refugees. Many of them had been tortured, branded. There was the religious wars, Protestant Catholic wars that had happened leading up to these, the movement of Europeans to the Americas. So all that was in their systems. And what he says in this book is when we don't heal our own trauma, we blow it through other people's bodies. And so it's of utmost importance when we look at what's happening in our world right now, that we each make space for our own grief, for our own loss, to be present for and tend to the ways that we have been hurt, the ways we've hurt others, so that we can, begin to deal with this accumulation of tension, of pain, of frozenness that keeps us out of our real felt experience. So if we're in our real felt experience, we can only empathize with another human being's pain. But when we're frozen because of all this grief, we can't actually feel someone else's pain. And this disembodiment is at the root of racism, but it's also at the root of patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, misogyny, anti-Semitism, all these ways we have of othering other groups, minorities, vulnerable populations, people in prison, the homeless. All of that comes when we aren't really connected to ourselves. So this is a quote from Reverend Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, an African-American teacher, from her book, The Way of Tenderness, a beautiful book, Awakening Through Race, Sexuality, and Gender. She writes, in these chaotic times, amid disconnection, the kind of transformation needed is one in which we are aligned with our bodies, with nature we inhabit. We must first of all know that we have inherited nature. Our bodies are a form of nature. They should not be hated, abused, or slaughtered. The body consists of all the great elements, earth, water, air, and fire. When we abuse collective social bodies, we also abuse and pollute the collective elements. We ignore form as nature. So we also are in this very dire state with our climate, with climate chaos, because of this disembodiment, because of the disrespect, the disconnection from our bodies, from our experience as physical beings. So mindfulness can really help us to come back to our bodies, to reunite our bodies and mind and process this pain. This practice of compassion, of bringing up moments of care, can help us to really hold and care for the pain that's also there. And so, when we practice to really look at and heal and turn toward this accumulated individual pain and hurt, then the ancestral and intergenerational hurt can also begin to arise and be healed. And then we become this transformer, this channel that doesn't just clear out our own stuff, but also our ancestors. Generations of stuck trauma that can flow and no longer clog up the pipes of our own or the collective will. Because once that get moved through, what's naturally there is a care and a willingness and an effort, a desire to protect and cherish each other, everyone, with no exception. So Thomas Hübl, a German teacher, has talked about this trauma as like snow that gets frozen because it doesn't melt from one generation, and the next generation's snow falls on that and it freezes, and then soon you have this block of ice. And he says, if that ice would melt, all of our solutions for all of our problems, climate change, poverty, war, are all underneath those layers of ice. All the solutions are already they're already there. They're just stuck under this layers of inherited trauma. So this is Dan Emmons, who says, what most needs attention is the part of us that we seek to avoid feeling. When we have tended to that, we are changed and the world changes with us. So when we melt the ice, the world is healed as well. So I invite you to read the article that I sent out to you if you haven't already. I won't have time to share parts of it right now, but I sent out an article with statistics about racial inequality in the UK that can't be ignored. And just to say that in that article, it says Black people are 4 times more likely to die from coronavirus than white people. I think that's even higher than the rate in the US. There's many important statistics in that article that really point to the suffering of peoples of color, Black, Asian, minority, BAME, sorry, I'm not getting that whole acronym right there. But people of color in the UK, a great deal of suffering, great deal of inequality in employment and housing and the ways they're treated by police and healthcare. So please read that if it's not familiar to you, because the question that I'll leave you with as we think about compassion as the best protection is, what does it mean for each of us to attend to the suffering in the UK around race, the structural inequalities, the devaluing of Black and brown lives? This is a question for our spiritual practice. This is a question for us as mindfulness practitioners, that we are called to engage and really look at this as a practice of compassion. So I will end there. Thank you for your attention, and maybe we can listen to a sound of the bell, and then Sita will share with us.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, thank you, dear sister Kaira Jewel, for a beautiful talk. There's so much to say and respond to, but I'll start with what you talked about, mentioned Thai in Vietnam during the war. In 2005, I was very lucky to be able to join the international Sangha and join Thai on his first return trip to Vietnam, which was a transformatory experience for me. I had not been to that part of the world before. And before I returned to the UK, I had some time off and I went to visit Laos, which was a country I'd wanted to visit for many years. I knew nothing about Laos and very little about how the country had been bombed along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And when I arrived and I began to understand and learn more about the history and the people, and therefore also about the experiences that Thai would have gone through during the war and understand the history, Thai, it's important to remember that Laos has the accolade of being the most bombed country in the world. During those years, 2.5 tons of ammunition were dropped for every man, woman, and child. But yet, the people that I met in Laos were kind, generous, and compassionate. And I've made many trips returning there, meeting with people, hearing their stories, and traveling through the region. And each time I am struck by the sense of compassion that people have. On a recent trip, I went to Tampu, which is a place where there was a massacre and nearly 400 people were killed, and everyone in the village. And talking to my guide, there was not a hint of anger, just a sense that we need to move on, we need to transform our past, and we have to have understanding for ourselves, our ancestors, as well as those young American soldiers that had committed those bombings. So my last trip was in February this year, and coming back on the plane, many of us were masked because that's when the pandemic was beginning to take off. And I was reflecting a great deal on the sense of healing and compassion that I had witnessed in my trip, the generosity, the openness, the kindness of the many people I'd met who talked so much about the need to transform the violence and war that is within us and around us for everyone, not just for the people of Laos, but for the people of America, because women in America would have lost their sons in the war, and therefore we all needed to work, not just, everyone needed to work towards a sense of peace. And I came back to the UK, and I wasn't very well, and I didn't know whether I had the virus or not. So I was advised to self-isolate, which I did for 14 days in a room. I was only allowed in one room in the house. So I took it as a time, as a retreat, and to practice and to reflect. But I felt the need very much to reach out to other members of the Sangha and the community, which I did, and revived a Sangha up here in the Dales, which is very small and has been difficult meeting because of living in a very rural area and transport, etc. And we began to meet online, and as we did, the community that has grown over a period of time, and we meet each day, Monday to Friday, and now also on Saturdays, each sitting together. And when we sit at the end of our meditations, we also practice loving kindness. And I have found that practice of the loving kindness has been really helpful and transformatory to transform the seeds of anxiety within myself, worry, fear. I've faced a number of bereavements during this lockdown, and it is easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this around us. But the consistent sitting and being with whatever we're experiencing in our bodies has been very stabilizing, not just for me, but I know for the other members of the Sangha who are sitting together. We can calm ourselves, and we get to know and touch one another in a different way. So it's meant that I am less buffeted by what is thrown at me. I found that Thai's practice throughout the years has been something that has helped to stabilize me, even when in places of danger. I remember after that first trip, well, a few years actually after that first trip to Vietnam, being on a train or leaving Leeds, and a young man had threatened to kill me. And I moved from the carriage that I was in order to remain safe. And my instinct, and the first thing I did, was to sit down and to send metta to this young man. The act of being able to do that and to help to transform my own pain and his certainly helped me, and I hope that it in a way was able to give him comfort too. these practices have helped and protected me as well in my work going into prisons. Just before that first trip to Vietnam, I was working in a high security prison and meeting a man in a kind of bubble where you can't actually sit in the same room because the individual is considered to be too dangerous to be with. And I was listening to this young man, and through the doors, through the kind of perspex doors on the other side, there were 3 prison officers came through with riot shields, manhandling a young black man. And it was all I could do to stay, to sit, and to be present. I wanted desperately to open the door and run out and throw my arms around him, because I had remembered that Sister Shang Kong had once said that, you know, whence there is great pain, then sometimes you just need to embrace someone. So I did so with my heart, and I looked at him with eyes of loving kindness. And then I turned back to the man that I was with, and he hadn't flinched or moved. I asked him if he would like to learn the metta practice. He said yes. So I explained to him what he should do. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I left the prison. Then was my trip to Vietnam. And when I came back, he had practiced deeply, and I was able to sit in the same room with him, and we were able to hold hands and chant together. And he had begun just with this sitting, able to transform his own pain, which not only helped transform him, but also me and my ability to know that every act of compassion and kindness can transform us and those around us. Thank you.
Dear friends, maybe we can just enjoy listening to one sound of the bell, and then we can have a short comfort break or enjoy some mindful moves together. So thank you so much to Sita and Kaira Jewel for their wonderful talk and sharing. And what I'm going to offer now is just a few mindful moves. So we have the opportunity to stand up and do some mindful moves, but if we need a comfort break, we can do that too. So I'm just going to, I'm going to take off my headphones. So if you'd like to stand up, or we can all take a big stretch if you'd like to, just to start.